So a viewer sent this to me yesterday, and it was a clip of the Ben Shapiro show. Now, you should watch all sides in order to inform yourselves. I'm not expecting you to agree with Ben. He's going to make a point that you're probably, if you're on the left side of the spectrum, going to disagree with, but I'm going to amplify it and show you how, broadly speaking, though, it's correct. And then if you're on the left side, something that you'll completely agree with, and if you're on the right side, you might disagree with, but I'm going to show you how it works. Okay, so here's his clips, and we're going to make two broad points. Just stay with me because this is important.
How crucial is that aid for Ukraine right now?
It's absolutely crucial, and we should have a standalone up or down vote on the aid to Ukraine. And I strongly support the aid to Ukraine. But what I don't support is getting rid of the America's commitment to asylum or parole just to give aid to Ukraine. I mean, we're not.
Okay, let's hear what he said. He's prioritizing aid to Ukraine below other things, and he's a Democrat from California. So when Republicans prioritize it below other things, we should rightly condemn them. Should we rightly condemn a Democrat who puts Ukraine below other things as well? Just listen to what he has to say, and then we'll talk about it.
Not going to compromise our entire values as a nation over that.
I mean, values as a nation? I didn't realize that value as a nation was allowing people to make spurious claims of refugee status. You know, all of this plays directly into Donald Trump's hands. I say, the radical left capturing Biden has been the downfall of his administration.
Okay, so where do you stand on what's important? This channel's fully devoted to supporting Ukraine. Now, I'm a conservative, but I'm not making a political point. I'm saying, I've condemned Republicans who should be actively supporting Ukraine. Don't do that. Now, since they are at loggerheads about what's going on here right now, Democrats, make what kind of deal you can make in order to support Ukraine. Work through this system, get this thing done. But anybody the question is, how high do you prioritize support for Ukraine? And we need to be fair to all sides in looking at, do you really support it? You just have to be fair about the principle of it has to be a higher priority. And it's unfortunate that it's not a priority with a lot of Republicans. Shame on them. Absolutely. 100%. But if you say that, you also have to ask, for your counterparts in the Democratic Party, where do you prioritize Ukraine? Okay, let's go on to the second point. This is probably the point the left will like a little bit more, and it's one that I want to amplify because it's a really important thing about how to understand Donald Trump.
Donald Trump has a piece in the Des Moines Register, ahead of the Iowa caucuses, talking about Joe Biden's border disaster. And
okay, for background, the Iowa caucus are coming up in about 3 weeks, something like that. This is the first primary. It's not a primary, it's actually a caucus. It's slightly different than a primary, but essentially every state gets to nominate their candidates, and Iowa traditionally comes first. Then they go to New Hampshire, then they go to South Carolina. Now, Joe Biden, just for context, was losing in Iowa, was losing in New Hampshire, and only got traction in South Carolina, and then he picked up some steam and, well, ultimately won his party's nomination. So, but Iowa's very important, and it's coming up very quickly. So this piece that he's talking about came out just before this is happening. I'm just trying to give you the background.
He says, of course, he didn't write this, but this will be the policy he implements. See, this is the thing about Trump. This is the thing that conservatives like me understand. Donald Trump says a lot of crap when he's tweeting.
Everybody understands that. Nobody doubts that. There's nobody left, right, or center that doesn't think that he doesn't say a lot of crap. You'd be surprised. Republicans are like, yeah, there he goes again, right? Even those that like him are like, yeah, he says all this nonsense. But listen to the rest of this.
His actual policy gets made by the people around him.
Did you hear that? His actual policy gets made by the people around him. So you don't look at Trump and say, well, this is what Trump believes. You look at who's advising him and what do they believe, and that's where he's going to go. So that's how you can understand where Trump is. Now that's, in Ukraine's case, a very dangerous thing. And I'll tell you why in just a moment.
The people who can convince Donald Trump of their policy end up getting their policy actually passed, made law, implemented. This is why you have 3 conservative Supreme Court justices and not randos that Donald Trump picked out of a lineup. It's not because Donald Trump has deep engagement with the issue of Supreme Court jurisprudence. It's because Leonard Leo was telling him, here is a list of justices who will probably be good. And this is just how Trump works. And everybody who's going to vote for Trump basically understands this.
So conservatives, so who he listens to is very important. So this is why I'm very gloomy about the idea of Trump actually turning it around on Ukraine and becoming actually, a positive thing. Let's say hypothetically that Trump was elected. I highly doubt that he is going to have a turnaround and say, you know what, Ukraine needs to be supported because they are a democratic state being invaded by an authoritarian regime next door. It is not, and I can't stress this enough, if you are on the left side of the spectrum, suspend your disbelief for a moment and try to listen to me. It's not because I'm an authoritarian and I like authoritarians. It's not that at all. Just set that aside. It's because who's advising him is saying this is the right path, and he leans very heavily on who advises him. The Leadership Institute talks about how personnel is policy, right? Whoever you put in place, that's what policy is going to be made. So who did Trump rely on early on? Well, he was relying on Paul Manafort. Who's Paul Manafort? Paul Manafort was actually an advisor to Yanukovych back in 2012, 13, something along those lines. So there's this connection there. And so it doesn't have, I don't think, anything to do with the first impeachment with his phone call with Zelensky. I don't think it's bad blood there so much as it is that he was relying on Paul Manafort early on. So again, if you want to understand Trump, you look at who's advising him about what. It's the same kind of thing when you try to understand and process Tucker Carlson. So Tucker Carlson is very, very fond of Orban, even fond of Putin. But why? Well, his father had connections in Hungary. He has this, whatever he's reading or listening to or whoever he's meeting with, they have these warm fuzzies with Orban. And so again, then that's spread through Tucker into the Republican Party. Same thing with Trump. It's spread through Trump, his connection from a pro-Yanukovych kind of way through Manafort and who his advisors are through Trump. It's broadcast out into the Republican Party, and it's just seeding all these bad seeds about not supporting Ukraine. Okay, so two important points that I want to make sure are absolutely clear. First one is we have to have as a very high value, very, very, very high value, regardless of if you're left, right, or center, support for Ukraine. That's what this whole channel is about. I have 1,000+ videos talking about supporting Ukraine, and I'm a conservative, right? That's where we should be. Second thing is, if you want to understand what Trump is like or how he's going to function, you understand who's advising him about what. And I can't quite figure this out, but if we wanted to change that, how would we go about doing it? How would we go about seeding in proper information that's going to have some influence, not just in Trump, but to undermine what Trump is saying, to undermine what Tucker is saying? There's got to be a way. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I know it exists. So I've seen evidence that polls shift, for example, with evangelicals. Polls shift. And why am I talking about evangelicals? Because they're right now one of the big pieces of the puzzle that if they shifted, if evangelicals who tend to lean away from supporting of Ukraine, and I'm an evangelical, if they could shift toward supporting Ukraine, the whole system would shift. But it's like this symbiotic relationship where Trump says this crap about Ukraine, or about, we're spending $200 billion or whatever he said the other day. And then they run with that, and then they support politicians, or they tell their politicians not to support it, and it becomes this symbiosis, right? I'm not sure how to undermine it, but if you have thoughts about that, I would love to hear what you have to say. This is like something that I've been chewing on for a long time, and I'm trying to figure out. All right, that's what I want to say. All that to say, it's not because I want you to listen to Ben Shapiro for Ben Shapiro, but I want you to hear different sides so that you can process, add notes to your neural network, and understand the big picture a little bit more effectively. All right, that's all that I have to say. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.